Shalom. Welcome everybody to the final episode of Sound the Call, a Jewish Journey through COP26, at least the final episode recording here from Glasgow. And Shavua Tov, it is Saturday night, November 6th, here with my friend and teammate, Nigel Savage. It's been quite a week here, and I want to thank you for being here with me. I want to thank you for all your support during this transition as I'm stepping into the new CEO role here with Chazon and Pearlstone merging. This happens to be coming, this event, at the end of my first 90 days on the job. So it's an interesting end to the listening tour. We're ending the listening tour by listening to the world. So it's been really something. 30,000 people here. Somebody told me that the actual conference is smaller than in the past because of COVID, but a whole bunch of people descending on Glasgow over the last week. And earlier today, hundreds of thousands of people marching, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's been really an intense event. There's the blue zone that we're inside of now with all the country pavilions and special events and plenaries with the world leaders, which some reason they did not invite us to. We must have misplaced the invitation. And then there's the green zone that's open to the public, and we've been at sessions in both the blue zone and green zone. But this is not the first time that Chazon has been at international event like this, or maybe not like this, but in the past. Tell us about, Nigel, what Chazon's prior experience and your prior experience has been at with UN events and multi-faith events like this.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you. I just want to say right back at you, this has been a really a pleasure with you and a really fascinating and rich experience. I think neither of us truly knew what to expect. And honestly, I think I came in with not exactly low expectations, but not completely knowing whether it made sense to be here. And amongst other things, I'm leaving feeling that this was time extremely well spent. Yes, as you said, it hasn't been a huge piece of Chazon's work, but I do believe that it has been an important piece of work. We were particularly involved in the lead up to, I always get the numbers confused, COP15 in Copenhagen and COP21 in Denmark. In Paris, sorry. And in both of those, we were really involved in sort of high-end interfaith gatherings, where we sort of, in the second one in Paris, sort of represented the Jewish community, the Jewish people. In the first one, put together a significant delegation representing the Jewish people. And I think it helped me understand, it gave me a kind of a sense of humility in a way, but also the profundity of the work, that I understood that on both of those occasions, partly we were chess pieces, the world's religions were chess pieces on the board of the leadership of the UN and really the leadership of the global environmental movement. And that in a sense, it was just a small piece of putting further pressure on governments to be able to say, the world's religions are really calling for change, and with a certain kind of moral and ancient voice. And both of those occasions were interesting. We met interesting people, we learned stuff, it prompted us to think things through. Each of them had impact in profound ways. One of them, Nomit Sor, who at the time was Deputy Mayor of Jerusalem, was part of the delegation and put together a table on the environmental impact of religious pilgrimage, which led to a huge conference on that topic and significant change. But this has felt very different. This feels like much more of a tipping point. And just in a personal sense, the lead up to those two things, I was aware just in colloquial conversation, most people, unless they were serious environmentalists, hadn't really thought about those COPs, didn't really know what they were, whereas it just feels as though, in a good way, in a moving way, that the eyes of the world have been on this gathering, and rightly so. What have you made of it? What have been the highlights for you?
Yeah, it really does feel like the world is watching. The number of people here, the media presence both here and then still looking at American media during the last week. It's been really powerful. And there have been a bunch of moments that stick out to me this past week. And I hope there's more highlights in the week ahead, although we won't be here for it. So just a few highlights for me. not only the United States rule on methane that was announced, but there's a whole focus. There's actually a pavilion on methane. You said it last night, Shabbat. May the Holy One bless the Jews and Palestinians and everyone left out. You left out methane. It's not meth. I mean, there's just
the people trying to
inert
control
gas, right?
Right.
So trying to put methane in its place. That was a highlight. Deforestation pledge to try to halt deforestation by 2030 and try to put finance behind that. That was pretty powerful. And to, I don't consider myself an expert on any of the policy matters here, but in being in some sessions around finance where people who have been doing this work for decades point to that and say that's more progress than we thought we were going to make, was exciting to me. And the whole framing around nature positive is really that nature-based solutions is a really big part of this. Feels really important and exciting because it has felt to me kind of lacking if we just talk about solar and wind, which is absolutely critical, but we don't, as if it's okay if all forests are cut down. So this feels there's more balance and rightfully so. And then the other piece I would say, we talked about finance a little bit, but the non-state actors, the corporate world, not just national governments, but local governments, that feels really encouraging. I will say in a number of these sessions, there've been quite a few Jews that have been, prominent, and that's been really powerful too. So those are a few of my highlights. What about you when you look back at the week? What are some of yours?
So, firstly, as you know, I've felt increasingly moved in the last day or two. I've found this an incredibly intense experience in a way that I definitely didn't expect. Of all things, Al Gore did a session yesterday. It was a 90-minute, it was kind of like his Inconvenient Truth thing from 15 years ago, but it was very much now, it was completely new. It was the most astonishing thing I think I've ever seen, honestly, in my life, the most intense presentation. It's incredibly dense, it was incredibly powerful, and I would say 2/3 of it was, it's not as if, it's not as if you and I haven't thought about these things before. It was the most visceral, comprehensive, devastating depiction of the multiple ways that we're doing damage to the world, and the certainty that those things are going to get worse, certainly in the next 5, 10, 15 years. At a certain point, I just started crying, like I really lost it. And so that was incredibly intense. And then in the last 30 minutes, he also put together a really constructive case for hope and a whole range of balls that have been set in train that are going to make things better. And I started crying all over again. And then the third time I was kind of moved because there's also something to me very Jewish about this specific thing. Here's Al Gore. He was vice president of the United States for 8 years. He won the Nobel Prize. He was a board member of Apple. He made a lot of money from that. He could be on a beach. He doesn't have to do this stuff. Like, he's made his point. He's written into history. And I've never seen a presentation that was more powerful, including emotionally powerful. And so I think it somehow or other, I feel this incredibly intense, we go into Yom Kippur with this notion that we should imagine when we're davening on Yom Kippur that our life is completely evenly balanced and that the next thing that we do will tip the scales for good or ill. And I feel that incredibly intense sense that we are at a pivot point for the world and that there are all sorts of bad things happening and all sorts of good things happening in every single one of us individually, every institution, every religious community, every company, every city, every country. Literally, it's not one of us, it's literally all of us. What are we going to do next?
Yeah. And I think that's the right pivot for me to think about, for us to think about the challenges. And I had a few moments finding myself cry, like not walking into a session, imagining or experience, expecting to become emotional, but just the experience of being here with people all around the world who have come here together with common cause is so profound. I've been particularly moved in moments of sort of witnessing testimony and leadership of Indigenous peoples, and coming to the march today. So in the Washington Post, they said it was 100,000. I heard march organizers say it was 150 or 250,000. It was so many people.
In the pouring rain.
In the pouring wind, it was like, and people were not even phased a little bit. And drumming and music and dancing and signs. And I just found it to be so powerful. And there was so much, there's really a sense, I found, there's like a lot of joy in that. And there is definitely a sense of anger. There's definitely, this is nowhere near enough. We have a very long way to go. What is the climate justice for developing nations? What is the not tokenizing of youth and women leadership and Indigenous leadership, but the actual empowerment of those key folks that we need to follow the leadership of? There's I think a challenge that I feel. I was just talking to someone who says this has actually been a debate for years of, do we just focus on the technological fix, or is there actually not, or obviously there's a deeper cultural crisis and moral crisis going on here. How and when do we really confront that head on? And I think this, a big piece of this comes back to this idea. We see a lot around here, race to zero, race to nature positive. And this is not a simple thing. It's the largest, arguably the largest project in like the history of humanity. And to race, what does that mean for equity? What does that mean for justice? How does it happen in a way that's really done right? People are saying, you know, in the march, the big sign that had a net zero, because, you know, people committed to net zero by 2050, 2060, 2070, big sign of net zero with the X across it. We don't want net zero, we want real zero. We don't want it to be a balance. We want 24/7, everywhere in the world, renewable energy. And there's just, and hearing that sort of really prophetic voice from the protesters, from Greta Thunberg, from Indigenous leaders, pushing people and feeling like really moved by that, and seeing the sort of two sides of the same coin, like all those people which we were a part of marching, and then all these people in here that are very much inside the system, and how do we find the path forward together? And there's hope and there's anger. And it's just like there's a lot of emotion. I think that's part of how it becomes a tipping point, is that there's so much emotion here. So I don't know, what do you make of all that?
I feel it's been clarifying in certain ways. It is more and more clear to me that the key action is happening at the level of like governments and the private sector. And it's literally cities and companies literally cleaning up their act and changing their policies and committing to not putting out carbon, and in certain cases committing to reversing it. And actually that's what the world needs. Like it really is. There's no question about that. And indeed, just one microscopic thing on that. I think we talked about this. One of the people I bumped into in the corridor here 2 days ago, and I thanked him, of all things, was the Comptroller General of the State of Israel, because I was at the Knesset 10 days ago for the publication of the Comptroller General's report. Here is something buried in the bowels of the government. It's effectively an accounting and audit office. And they've done a 659-page critique of Israel's government in relationship to climate crisis over the last decade, and detailed in all sorts of specific ways where the government had made commitments and not kept them or not measured them. And it was a very powerful event. Biggest conference space in the Knesset was full. There were a lot of people there. There were MKs from an exceptionally wide spectrum. And it feels clear coming out of that they are gonna end up putting in place actual measurable goals and mechanisms to track it that will actually like measurably have impact. And as that happens, country by country, city by city, company by company, I think that's absolutely critical. And it turned out, again, one teeny weeny unsexy piece of copy, as it turns out all of the standards people, and I think actually the Secretary General of the UN also announced something on this, all of the standards people have started to meet to agree single common standards globally just to track carbon outputs. And actually, that's going to turn out to be incredibly profound for the future of planet Earth. So I feel clear that that stuff's incredibly important. The question then is, well, what is the role of religion? What's the role of Chazon? What's the role of public pressure? And this is the place where I think this is this balance between humility and profound significance. To the extent that this CARP is different than it was 10 years ago, it's actually because of the aggregate forces of civil society. It's because of the environmental movement. It is because of religious environmentalists. And it is because ultimately governments and companies are responsive to that real change happens. It's just fascinating looking at Tesla. Tesla is both producing electric cars, but ultimately the success of Tesla is partly because people want to buy them. People partly want to buy them, but at the moment a price premium because they understand that that's important. And meanwhile, it's suddenly having a knock-on effect on GM and Ford. So that's how it is. I think that we're all in it together. And I don't think it's helpful, honestly, doing the which is more important than what. I really, really believe that it needs all of us. And that whole Reb Zusha thing, right? It's not that you have to be like Moses, our teacher. It's like, how can you, Jakir, be the best Jakir can be? How can I be the best person I can be? How can anybody watching or listening be the best person or institution they can be? That's the key challenge.
Amen. And we had a chance to really share and sort of sit together with new friends and old last night, Friday night, Shabbat dinner, to sort of process this and digest this together at Garnet Hill Synagogue, a historic synagogue in Glasgow, 150-year-old almost shul. The local Jewish community here just so sweet and warm and welcoming. Really shout out to Susan Siegel, who put the whole dinner together along with Sonia Sugarman on our team. And it was like 50 people, some of whom definitely a great local contingent, and a few of us from America, and a bunch of people from Israel. And it was so beautiful. It was so sweet to be there, to dive in together, to have dinner together. And then we heard folks just share what was their week like, what were some of the big takeaways, what were people thinking about. And I think we just heard a microcosm of this conversation there. Like some people feeling edge, like frustrated, and a lot of people feeling like excitement and hope and positivity, and coming from a variety of different perspectives. And I think, but everybody really sharing like, this is sweet to be able to gather as a chevra, as a Jewish community from all over the world in a little shul together. I mean, that was really special. What was that your experience?
Well, I was just going to say, and there was a postscript today because, in fact, in shul today, they had the Lord Provost of Glasgow, which is, it turns out, here the name for the mayor, and leaders from the Muslim community and the Hindu community. And last night we had a Jesuit priest, and I actually had the chance to talk with the Lord Provost of Glasgow and thank him for the city of Glasgow doing an amazing job. They set up a thing called Faith Forum in this town after 9/11. And then following the war in Gaza 7 years ago, the Jewish community and the Muslim community took deeper steps to working closely together. And I had the chance to say to the Lord Provost, there's now essentially, the Chazon seal of sustainability played out on a larger scale. What is it to imagine Glasgow committing its religious communities over the next 7 years to being the best city in Britain in terms of environmental sustainability? And I think it's only a small piece of it, but I think the city of Glasgow is coming out of this with an incredible sense of sort of pride and desire to drive further change. I have no idea why I'm so sort of verklempt about this. I really am.
Yeah.
I'm totally astonished by it, but I really am.
It's like structurally profound to be in a place where so many people are coming. Yeah. We were really honored to be able to host that gathering last night and bring together everybody for dinner. And then today, like in the march, I'm dancing next to the drum line, and there's young Israelis that I had met last night, and we marched together, like just really, really sweet. And so as we move towards closing, it has been a powerful week. We are going to be in different parts of the world here over the months to come. But this is a powerful time. So it's not only powerful here in Glasgow, it's powerful in the Jewish calendar. So I'd love for your reflections, thoughts on where we are in time.
So Friday was Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which means this is, the starting bell for Hanukkah, which of course is both light in the darkness and about conserving oil, making it last longer. I had 2 minutes to speak at Windsor Castle, head of that cup, somehow or other to represent the Jewish people, and I was really intimidated by it. Was I going to talk about tashchit, not wasting, this, that? And slightly to my surprise, it wasn't where I started. I found myself talking about hope and actually talking about Tisha B'Av. That here we have in the summer something 3 weeks that culminates in essentially commemorating destruction, all of the different destructions that we've experienced, facing them squarely. And yet we have the idea that Mashiach, that the Messiah will be born on the afternoon of Tisha B'Av. We kind of mimic our own death. We come out alive. And 6 days later, it's Tu B'Av, the festival of love. And I think that Hanukkah mimics that. And I feel very, very strongly coming out of this cup that hope is a Jewish value and a Jewish commitment. And it's absolutely what Hanukkah is about. And that our obligation is to face squarely the things that are going wrong in the world, but not be pulled down by it, not get depressed, not let it make us like scared and angry, doesn't bring out the best in us, and actually go forwards with a sense of hope and commitment. Last thought from you.
I'm feeling all of that, and I'm also feeling the moment we're in coming out of Shabbat. How powerful a spiritual technology and ecological and environmental technology Shabbat is. In several of the conversations with multi-faith leaders, the Sabbath it's not enough by itself, but it has potential to be a revolutionary spiritual tool in this moment and in this movement. And the Shemitah year, Kol V'chomer, even more so. So we're here coming, still in the first part of the Shemitah year, which asks us, pushes us, demands that we step back and try to push the ecological and social reset button on society. And man, is this a Shemitah gathering. I don't know that anybody else would call it that. It actually feels even more like Yovel, the Jubilee year, the Hakel, like the gathering of, in this case, the world, to really think about what our society is about. So it's so profound. So it's so moving. And just really grateful for the wisdom in our tradition that pushes us to really step back, to stop, to breathe, and to face ourselves and to push ourselves as a society.
There's one postscript that you and I both only really learned or thought about over the course of this Shabbat, which is that, so just to explain to everybody, one of the reasons that COP26 has been a particularly big deal is that there are certain things that are tracked every 5 years, and this was the 5-year one. It's possible that that's now going to become an annual thing. So in a sense, the COP every year will almost be on the scale. But we hadn't got our heads around the fact that COP27 is due to be this time next year in Sharm el-Sheikh, almost at the time of our Israel ride. And so that's also kind of interesting to think about in terms of Israel and Egypt and the Middle East and all of that kind of stuff.
Who was it in one of our interviews that we learned that after the Arctic, which people hear a lot about as the most sensitive landscape to climate, and obviously the sea, the ice caps melting and everything, that the Middle East is the second most sensitive climate zone. And I imagine that has something to do with the fact that that's why it's there next year, is to understand how important that impact is. So we will be leaving in the next day or so. Folks are here for another week. There's a whole new raft of people that have just arrived for week 2. We will continue to watch this carefully. And as we leave, as people travel, and as this journey continues, not just physically, but politically, socially, spiritually, morally, we want to end with the traveler's prayer, that we really ask for protection for everyone here doing such holy work, for ourselves, and that we reach this destination that we are all on. May it be your will, Creator, that you lead us toward peace, guide our footsteps toward peace, and make us reach our desired destination for life, gladness, and peace. May you rescue us from the hand of every foe, ambush along the way, and from all manner of punishments that assemble to come to earth. May you send blessing in our work and grant us grace, kindness, and mercy in your eyes and in the eyes of all who see us. May you hear the sound of our humble request. Blessed are you, Creator, who hears prayer.
Amen. Yiratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'levoteinu v'imotenu shetolichenu l'shalom v'tatzidenu l'shalom v'tadrichenu l'shalom v'tagyenu limchos chepsenu l'chayim l'simcha l'shalom v'tatzilenu mikaf kol oyev v'orev v'listim v'chayot ra'ot and all kinds of other bad things in the world baderech. Mikol minei pranu yotem v'trakshot lavo la'olam v'titnenu l'chayin u'l'chesed urachamim b'einecha u'v'nei kol roinu. Kiel shamet filah v'tachanun atah baruch atah Adonai shamet filah.
Amen. Thank you, sir. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on Sound the Call. Dispatches from Glasgow. Sending everybody love. See you on the other side.